Hello and welcome to another Thursday interview here with me, Anne Diamond, on Viking.TV. And we're celebrating engineering this week. And you probably don't need me to tell you, it's 50 years since the last manned moon landing. And astronaut Charlie Duke came to the Science Museum here in London this week to be feted as the world's youngest person alive now to have ever walked on the moon. And we made a big fuss of him. A bit earlier this year, of course, we also celebrated a huge anniversary of John Glenn becoming the first American in space. And every year, NASA brings us another anniversary of an amazing event in space. And whilst that is all about looking back, the future is looking exceptionally bright at the moment for space travel, with the amazing adventures of the private space entrepreneurs. Last year, 3 companies, SpaceX, Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic, achieved key feats in space travel, previously only reserved to countries and governments. They transported astronauts to the International Space Station, flew enthusiasts into space, rich enthusiasts. They took Captain Kirk where few men had ever been before. They delivered cargo to low Earth orbit and even showed how you can land a rocket on its tail to be reused. Well, my special guest today is someone famous for his enthusiasm for space travel and all of the space programs, and whose enthusiasm is particularly infectious when he talks about it. His times on the space shuttle and the ISS. He is an astronaut, aquanaut, engineer, NASA veteran, and former director of space operations at SpaceX, Garrett Reisman, and he joins us now. Hello there and welcome.
Hi, Anne. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's great to be. I mean, I'm absolutely thrilled to meet you, as is everybody on Viking, because we're really quite space mad. But are you ever thrilled by your own career? Do you ever pinch yourself and think, hey, I did it?
Yeah, it's definitely, I definitely feel very fortunate. I had a lot of good breaks along the way. And it still puzzles me as to why NASA even picked me in the first place. You know, they say at NASA the failure is not an option, and I say au contraire. You know, you picked me, so I don't know how you messed that up. I don't know what went right or what karma I had used up to pull this off, but I'm very grateful that it all worked out.
Yeah, exactly. It must be wonderful to look back on it, but you're still working in it. Before we even get started on how you got there, I just want to excite everybody by your first mission. I want to look at your first shuttle mission. This was STS-123 in 2008, which became a very long mission, didn't it?
That's right. So I went up on that shuttle mission, and they left me behind. Actually, they closed the door and said, "I hope you like the space station and these 2 people up here, because that's the only people you're going to see for the next couple months." And they went home. And so it was part of the plan. I was always supposed to be a crew member on the space station. And after they dropped me off, I ended up staying up there for a total of 95 days.
Wow. Well, let's have a little video now of you going up in Endeavour and meeting up with the rest of the crew that were already on board the ISS, because this was just the start of a glittering career as an astronaut. I don't know about you. I am tremendously excited just watching that. Do you still feel excited by it?
Oh yeah, every time I watch that, it brings back some really amazing memories, and so I always have a lot of fun and get a chuckle out of it. Just it's a little less scary when you're watching it. When you're actually doing it, you don't know how it's going to turn out, but it's great
Yeah.
watching it after the fact.
Well, exactly. I mean, you are sitting on top of, I mean, you've described it many times, but you're sitting on top of this massive explosive rocket. What is it like? All right, this is a really simplistic question, but what is it really like? You've done all the training, but you can never train for the massive effect of the G-force of actually being lifted up out of the atmosphere, and then losing it straight away and becoming weightless. Can you describe
Yeah, it's fantastic. So you do in the shuttle we pulled 3 Gs. The rockets we're flying now go even higher. They reach about 4.5 Gs on the SpaceX Dragon, for example. And so, but you take it lying down. It's through your chest, and it kind of feels like you weigh three, or in the case of the Dragon, 4.5 times as much as you really do, or it feels like something very heavy is on your chest, and you have to actually think about breathing and make an effort. It's no longer involuntary. And that's a bit unusual. And then, as you pointed out at the end, it goes instantaneously from 3 Gs or 4.5 to zero. And it feels like you're being shot out of your seat. You put your arms up like this because you're afraid you can be squished like a bug on the windshield, on the bulkhead that's in front of you. And then you realize that you're not being shot out of your seat. You're just no longer being held down in it. Everything is floating. You're in microgravity. And all those veteran astronauts are pointing at you and laughing. Like, look at the new guy with the arms up, ain't that cute?
you're the guy doing this? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And they're like, and then you're like, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. Yeah.
Okay, once the adrenaline maybe has stopped pumping quite so much and you got over the sheer excitement of being weightless and being in space, the first night, what's that like? Because I gather you suffer from a loss of the sense of smell or taste, you have congestion. I mean, everything in your body is just becoming weightless itself.
That's true. So your body is going through a really interesting transition where a lot of things are changing due to the fact that you're no longer in 1G, no longer subjected to Earth's gravity. So you do get a shift of the fluid from your lower body that normally pulls up in our legs. That shifts up to your upper body and even into your head. And it feels like you're congested. I remember I woke up in the middle of the night and on my first night in space. And when you're kind of groggy and you come out of a dream and you're not really sure, your conception of reality is a bit ill-determined at that point. And I remember thinking, why am I standing on my head? Why am I sleeping upside down, hanging from the ceiling? Because that's what it feels like. It feels like when all that blood rushes up to your head, it feels like you're upside down. And I'm like, why am I sleeping on my head? And I looked out the window, I saw the Earth. I'm like, oh, that's right, I'm in space. And they told me this was going to happen. So all of a sudden I was like, oh yeah, I understand. But yeah, so it is strange those first couple of days.
Yeah, because everything I suppose we've got used to, the idea of top and bottom, north and south, everything, I mean, that doesn't matter anymore in space, does it?
No, there's really no up and down. I mean, when you sleep in a sleeping bag, but you don't have to put it on the floor. You can put it on the ceiling, you can put it on the wall, you can put it wherever you want because it's going to feel the same.
And what about getting to terms with everyday life, like things that you eat? I mean, what's the food like for a start? And is it any good, or do you have to give that up completely, the idea of tasty food?
Well, the food is not that great, I'll be honest with you. I never really. So when I was on the space station, we had primarily American food and Russian food. And in both cases, the food was based on military rations. So you have on the American food, it's all kind of like camping food. It was dehydrated. You just had to add water, heat it up. It was irradiated. It was packaged in foil bags and things like that. So it's a lot like the stuff you eat when you're camping, which is not exactly a Michelin, 5-star meal. And then on the Russian side, actually the food on the Russian food actually was, in my opinion, more tasty. But the problem was one in presentation because it's packaged in cans. So when you open these cans up, you look and it looks like dog food, and it's hard to get excited about a meal when it's coming out of a can like that.
Yeah, I can understand that. But they had tastier food than you.
They did actually. I think the Russian food was tastier, but the presentation was lacking. But But the good news is that now with, and we'll talk more about this later, but with commercial space flight happening now and space tourism, we're starting to get better food up there. So this last mission, we sent the Axiom crew up to the space station, and they actually got food prepared by Jose Andres, which was apparently quite tasty.
Yeah,
so things are improving.
Yeah.
But in general, I think most people, though, and historically, those of us that were professional astronauts, we weren't going for the food. You know, that wasn't the draw. So
no, but after 90 days or so, you need something tasty, don't you? 90 days is a long time.
It's a long time. It's a long time. And you can bring some, as long as it's of a certain, meets certain requirements, you're allowed to bring some things of your own choosing. And I erred on the side of candy. I don't know why, but I took a lot of candy. I had Swedish fish and candy corn and things like that. And after a couple of days, I realized I should have brought some entrees. I really should.
We've got video a bit later on. We'll show some video of obviously those candies that you took on board. But you trained, you did do some time as an aquanaut, didn't you? Which I know that underwater training is very good for an astronaut. But you did this long before you became an astronaut, I think, didn't you?
No, this was while I was an astronaut, but before I had flown in space for the first time. So the intention here is this is an analog, an environment that in some ways is similar to being up in space, in the sense that you're isolated, you're confined in this small habitat with 6 other people, and there's no quick way to get, and the food is also very bad. So it's kind of, in a lot of ways, it's very similar. So, and the most importantly, psychologically, because we're living under the water, you have to go through a lengthy decompression process to come back. So it actually takes the same amount of time to get from inside that habitat to a hospital as it would from on board the space station. It's about 24 hours to do that. So it's a little bit different when you're in the real world and you're actually physically removed from the rest of society like that. It's good mental preparation for being up in space.
I remember during the Apollo program, they always said if anything had gone wrong in any of those Apollo missions, there was no fallback. There was no extra special Apollo sitting on the pad ready to take off to rescue. In other words, there was no obvious rescue mission. But was there during the shuttle missions? Could you have been rescued if you'd gone very ill on board the ISS?
So that's an interesting question. So you're right on Apollo. It could be weeks to come back, depending on when you had the problem, or it certainly is going to be multiple days if you're on the moon. There's no quick way home. But this is going to be much worse when we go to Mars. It could be once you are committed to going to Mars, it could be as long as 2.5 years before you could come back, even if you have an emergency. So we have to be prepared for this kind of no option to come home quickly. But on the ISS, we had an advantage, which was we always had some kind of a lifeboat, and we still do today. So you have some kind of capsule, either a Soyuz capsule, a Russian capsule, or today we have these Dragon capsules that if you had to, if somebody has appendicitis or some kind of medical emergency, you can get in there within about 24 hours, you can be back on Earth.
Wow, that is impressive. Yeah, the Apollo astronauts would be very envious of that. So let's go right back to your childhood. You had a very happy childhood, I know, and your dad was an engineer, I think. But what did you ever want to be? Did you ever think of being an astronaut in those days?
So my dad was an engineer, and but on the other side of the equation, I had a mother who's afraid of flying. And when I say afraid of flying, I don't mean like flying on F-16s or X-1 rocket planes or something. I mean like flying on United, airlines. And there she is. There's a picture of her.
Yeah, so but that's a picture in front of an airplane.
I know. That was actually the first day I actually got her to fly with me. And the funny thing was the only way I can get her to fly with me was telling her, look, I'm taking my dad and my sister, who was actually the person taking that photo. I said, I'm taking the 2 of them. Why don't you hop in? Because if something goes wrong, we all go down together. You don't want to be the only one left and be all alone for the rest of your life. What kind of a terrible way would that be to go through life?
That's a way to talk somebody onto an aircraft.
I know, but it worked. That logic was, it was kind of inescapable, and she got in, and we had a great day, and it was fine. But yeah, so I didn't. When you look at the astronauts that flew on Apollo, with a single exception, they were all test pilots.
Yes.
And so I thought, well, there's no avenue for me to become an astronaut because I wasn't seeing anybody that looked like me up there, and I was not going to be a test pilot. So So I thought, well, this is not possible. If you asked me when I was, in high school, what I was going to be when I grow up, I would have said, maybe engineer or medical doctor. I was always interested in those kind of STEM fields, but I never would have said astronaut because of that. It was much later that I learned that NASA was actually selecting engineers and physicians and scientists and not just test pilots to become astronauts that I realized that, wow, this might be in the realm of possibility.
I read somewhere that it was your childhood dream to pay for the Knicks.
The Knicks. No, I think I'm genetically, I don't know if you could tell over this video, but I'm only about 5.5 feet tall. So playing for the Knicks, even as a point guard, was probably not going to be in the cards. So it would have been great, yeah. Or maybe playing for the Yankees as a baseball player, but physically, it became clear early on that I did not have that kind of talent.
Well, you did pretty well anyway. We've got some pictures here of, I think, the first mission. That must be STS-123, yes? Have a look at some of these pictures and let's just talk through them.
Okay. Well, that's actually my graduation.
That's your graduation, yeah.
Yeah, that's a graduation picture of my parents.
Did your dad get to see you be an astronaut?
He saw me. He was alive when I was selected and going through my training. Unfortunately, he passed before my first mission, so he never got a chance to actually see me fly in space. But he knew that was kind of in the cards. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. That's brilliant that he did. That's fantastic. And here you are now. You were the rookie in the team. Were there any other rookies in that mix?
There were. Listen, in that flight, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 of us. Actually, 4 of the 7 were making their first voyage. So there were a number of us that were rookies on that flight.
And no matter how well you train, you must still feel very nervous in that first walkout, knowing that you are actually going to sit on that rocket.
Yeah, it's a pretty exciting day. It doesn't, you get a chance to do this maybe just a couple times in your life, even if you do get selected to be an astronaut. So yeah, when you wake up that morning, you're definitely, very extremely excited. And I remember actually in the drive to the launch pad both times, I felt kind of giddy. We were almost like we're making silly jokes like a bunch of schoolboys, really. And just goofing around because I think that was just our way of letting the energy come out.
And it was a spectacular launch. I mean, obviously you didn't see it from the outside on the night, but the takeoff was incredible.
Yeah, boy, that launch, that night launch. You're right. I only see the video and the pictures, but the people who were standing on the ground could tell you that. It was unique because there was this low cloud layer. And so there was like kind of a normal night launch at first. But then when it went up into that cloud layer, it lit up the whole sky. It lit up all those clouds as a kind of a reflective blanket. And it turned night into day briefly for everybody standing on the ground watching. So it was really spectacular.
Did it do that for you inside? Was it light or dark? Is there a burning glow or do you not see that?
For that launch, I was downstairs, and we don't even have a window. So I didn't. There's one window, but it's way in the corner, and I couldn't see it from my seat. So I didn't have any. I knew what the weather was that day. We get briefed on that, but I didn't have any visual of that at all. The crew that were upstairs on the flight deck probably did see us punch through those clouds, but it wouldn't be nearly as spectacular for them as it would be for the people on the ground because you just fly through those clouds very quickly and you can't see the glow that's behind you. Yeah. So it actually is a much better show for the people watching on the ground.
I don't think I personally witnessed your shuttle launch, but I used to take my boys regularly to go and see shuttle launches, and we absolutely loved it. And you're 3 miles away, actually, sort of on Cocoa Beach or something, watching it, but you still feel the vibration in your rib cage, and of course you get this wonderful countdown. But I presume you don't get any of that. You probably feel the vibrations, but not the countdown, not the excitement.
No, people don't know this, but you don't actually hear that 10, 9, 8. You don't hear that inside. It's you hear a bunch of other events and technical call-outs that are happening. It sounds something like Navinit, 102, 102, 3 at 100. And all these things mean something. And they come at a certain cadence, so it's kind of like a countdown. And when you get to the end, then the engine's light, and okay, we're at 0. but nobody actually counts down from 10. That's just for the people watching on television.
And then you must feel the tremendous force. And then, as we talked about, then you going into zero gravity. And when do you get the first chance to actually look out of a window?
Well, if you're sitting upstairs, you get that view pretty much right away. On my second mission, my job actually was to get out of my seat and take video of the big external tank that was jettisoned, and so I got that beautiful view immediately. But on my first mission, it didn't happen right away because I was downstairs where there's just that one little window in the corner. And when you get up to orbit, there's a lot of work to be done. So I got out of my seat and I started doing the tasks that were laid out before me. And it was about a half an hour before I saw this pale blue glow coming out of that window. And I realized that, oh, that's the Earth out there. I probably should go have a look at that.
Yeah. Well, exactly. You've been through the training. You know that's going to happen. But when you first set your own eyes on the planet Earth from space, what does that feel like?
Yeah, it was all right.
What?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem for me when I had that first view of the Earth was that my expectations were so high. I expected this to be really transformative, kind of like a religious experience or something like that. And so I kind of paused and readied myself for it. I meditated and closed my eyes and I floated up to that window and took that full view of the Earth from space for the first time. And it kind of looked like it does in the pictures, I mean, it's like you've all seen pictures of the Earth from space, and we got HD video coming down now. It's spectacular. It kind of looked like that, and so I think that I think just because it was pretty. Don't get me wrong, it was really nice, but there was no heavenly choir. I didn't grab my crewmates' hands and sing Kumbaya. None of that happened.
Did you do a spacewalk on that first mission?
I did. That was
well, you must have felt it then. You must have felt that amazing.
That was overwhelming. Yeah, that view was incredible. When you're outside and you have that big glass helmet and you almost forget that piece of glass is there. There's really nothing between you and the Earth and the universe. And yeah, you can see what it's like out there. That is pretty overwhelming, incredibly surreal. That's my spacewalk partner Rick right there in that picture. Just seeing us out there after we practiced in this pool where there's really not much of a view at all. Just walls of the pool is really all you see when you practice in there. But now I'm out there with Rick, and at one point I said, "Hey, look at that!" And we looked over our shoulders, and we could see the entire east coast of the United States flying by with a massive set of lightning storms that were going. These thunderstorms are going from New York all the way to Houston, Texas. So we could see the interaction along that entire front of the lightning as it was kind of going up and down that line. It was really amazing, and nothing can really prepare you for that.
And when you say you're with Rick, is that Rick Linehan?
That's right. I know.
Yeah, who we've already met on Viking.TV is the first veterinarian in space.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're really lucky to have him on our mission because normally you don't have any kind of doctor, and so you end up having some test pilot or some engineer, administering shots. But we had Rick, who's a veterinarian. The only thing so he injected us with medication to help us with all those changes that happened on the first day. But the thing was, he wasn't used to his patients talking back. And he's not just like a dog and cat veterinarian. He would be flown into Thailand to deal with the royal elephants, and he's used to these massive animals, where it takes a good deal of physical force to accomplish those injections. So he wasn't used to doing it with humans, and so we'd be like, "Hey, easy, buddy," and he'd be like, "Why are you talking back? My other patients don't talk back."
When you're floating there in space, do you get a feeling of falling, which I've heard some astronauts describe, a fear of sort of falling down?
In the inside, not at all, really. When you're inside the vehicle, and there's no real fear or sensation. Sometimes in the space station, as you go over a kind of a T-junction where there's a module sticking the other way, and you look down, that does feel a little strange, but not. But we have had astronauts that have gone out to do a spacewalk, and looked down at the Earth and gotten a fear of falling. And then that is actually really problematic, because then you hold on to the handrails with excessive force, and that can really fatigue your muscles in your arms, which is not good. So we try to avoid that. But I never had that feeling. I don't know why, but I never felt like I was falling.
But when you go out on the spacewalk, you're looking at the Earth spinning below you, or I'm not sure whether it's spinning below you or you're orbiting it, but whatever. Do you look for home?
Yes, I did. That was one fun thing about looking out the window, was trying to identify places that were meaningful and then capture them with photographs. And it's hard, because you don't have very long to take a photo. So there's a picture. That's actually Jerusalem. I took that picture. You could see the ancient city of Jerusalem. And it's hard because you're flying by so quickly. I mean, you look out the window and you see like Seattle, and then 10 minutes later you'll see New York. And so you got to take these shots while you can. And oh, by the way, it might be cloudy, and then there's no shot at all, or the lighting conditions might not be if it's too early or too late. So you have to get lucky to get these shots, and it takes some skill. So it's like trying to get that elusive water buffalo when you're on safari in Nairobi or something like that. So, or Kenya, I should say. So anyway,
I guess in that case, you've been trained in photography too, because what sort of camera are you using? You're not on a phone taking landscape or portrait.
No.
You've got a very posh camera, as we'd call it.
Yeah.
You must have been trained in how to take the best photographs.
We did. We got formal training, and one of the really cool. There's a lot of great things about being an astronaut that I never realized before I got into it that I was going to be benefiting from. But one is that you get to borrow these really posh cameras. So we had these Nikons and like top of the line Nikon camera bodies with 200 or 800 millimeter lenses. These monstrous lenses that we could do incredible. So that those pictures that you see of like individual cities or buildings, that's all taken with an 800 millimeter lens. You can't actually see that with your naked eye.
Yeah.
And what's the one human-made object that you can see from space with the naked eye?
Pyramid.
The pyramids, yes. Or a lot of people say the Great Wall of China.
Great Wall of China. Yeah.
Great Wall of China. And I think that's bogus. Okay. I looked for the Great Wall over and over, and I never saw it. Right. I think that is a hoax generated by the Ministry of Tourism in China to get people to come visit their wall. And I kept looking for it. I never saw it. I think I'm sure it's a beautiful wall. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to offend anybody. I'm sure it's a really lovely wall, but I never
see it from space.
No.
Nor a pyramid.
I did get a picture of the pyramids. I was able to pick them out. But again, looking through that 800 millimeter lens, it's like looking through a telescope. Yeah. And so that's not, you can't look out the window and see it just with your eye, without use of some kind of binoculars or telescope or something.
Well, that's the other thing, of course, that we have all been brought up and educated to see the world as a world with borders and, defined countries. And of course, you up in space are just seeing the world. There are no borders that you can see from space.
That's true. Although, I kind of expected that. I mean, I didn't expect to go up there and see like dotted lines, between maybe they all be like, or that all the countries would be color coded or something. I knew that wasn't going to happen. But yeah, it is. There are some borders that are visible, if not with a naked eye, at least by looking through a lens. There's so obviously rivers and oceans are still, and coastlines are visible, and there's other areas where you have very different agricultural on one side of the border than the other. So you can see actually a stark difference across that border. So they're not completely invisible, but you're right, and it does look very peaceful. Obviously, you can't see any signs of conflict down there, which is a very nice and comforting feeling when you look out the window. But it's there. And actually, this is interesting and maybe counterintuitive, but I actually felt pretty safe in a lot of ways being up on the space station, because a lot of the human created dangers that are down there that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, things like crime or carjacking or something like that, or war or any of those kind of things, I'm completely immune from that. There's nobody down there that can touch me up in space. There's only a couple of governments that could possibly send something up to physically reach me, right? So, and in some ways, I felt quite safe.
Although you have got to get on with the other astronauts, and you were there for 95 days on the ISS, crews from different countries. You had Russians aboard, other nationals.
Yeah, so we had, let's see, the primarily the greatest number of foreign nationals up there that were not American were Russians. And by the way, it's all in proportion to the contributions that each country makes to the space station. There's quite a large Russian segment, so there's quite a number of Russian astronauts, and there's a lot of American modules, so there's a lot of Americans. But there are also, we had Japanese astronauts while I was up there, Canadians, although I didn't actually fly with any Canadians, but they come up from time to time, Europeans. And let's see. Actually, I was on board when the first South Korean astronaut came up to space, which was interesting. She was really great. She was really nice. But, you know, nobody really feels well those first couple days. You know, in addition to the fluid shift, there's other changes in your body. And you get something we call space adaptation sickness, which was basically kind of like motion sickness. If you ever got car sick or air sick, it's kind of like that. And so she wasn't very hungry as a result of, you know, and I had been up there for a while. I felt fine. And she had some kimchi and she offered it to me. She said, would you like some of this? I said, oh, yeah, that'd be great. So I started eating it. And then she said, oh, no. And what's the matter? She said, I was supposed to be the first one to eat kimchi in space. So I'm an answer to an extremely esoteric trivia question, which is who's the first person to eat kimchi in space? It's not who you think.
Thank you. I know that now.
Yeah.
That's very useful.
You impress your friends. Yes.
But it just shows that, I mean, you have to get on with these people. They're professionals. They're like you. And they're also incredibly enthusiastic about being there in the first place. And you do have a lot of fun on board. We've got some video now that you can talk us through. But it just shows that, I mean, yes, you're all very clever people. And you're there for a reason, but you have a great deal of fun on board doing the sort of things that anyone would love to do on board. And you, look at you now, doing a Superman takeoff, and then learning, I mean, getting very, very good at spinning through all of those different units in the space station.
I want to point out that you don't do these things on day one.
No, I'm
you know,
sure
all those spins
but
you have to get used to it.
Where you're juggling in space and doing the only sort of juggling you could ever do in zero gravity is just fantastic.
It's cheating. Okay, I admit it's not fair.
But can you tell us what sort of things you're juggling there? I mean, you've got some sort of a plastic scimitar.
Yes, that's sort. You know, it is quite dangerous. You know, that thing it can put out an eye with that thing.
Yeah, all right, but who on earth thought of taking that on board?
I think that was my wife actually that thought. Well, you know, you're allowed to send care packages up to from your family members, and you can't send anything too big. You have a volume constraint. So, but those inflatable things you could pack down very small, and then you just inflate them when you get up to space.
And now, I mean, we're looking at some of the serious stuff now because you did have serious jobs to do, but obviously you get time off to be just plain silly. And as we see.
Oh yeah, this was actually fun. We installed the first we installed the large Japanese laboratory module at the end of my 95 days on board the ISS, and it's such a large module that it had to be launched completely empty because if we put the equipment inside, it would be too heavy for the shuttle to lift to space. So we had all this big volume to play with, and that was unusual. And we did this experiment. People ask a lot, like, what would happen if you got stuck in space and you couldn't reach anything? And it turns out you can turn around. Swimming in air does not work very effectively at all, as you can see. That didn't help very much. Yeah.
But clearly, you enjoyed it.
You can't get lost in space. It can happen.
Yeah. And there's very little you can do, as we've seen in the movies, but we'll talk about movies a bit later on. So when you're taking a picture, you've been trained in how to take the best pictures. And as I say, you're not just holding up an iPhone or anything and trying to decide whether to do it landscape or otherwise portrait. But there are so many brilliant shots that we also have got from your STS-132 Atlantis mission, because you have flown all 3 space shuttles. Endeavour?
that was it's a pretty neat trick because I only launched twice, but I got to fly on all three of them. That's true. So I flew on my first mission. I flew up an Endeavour, and they dropped me off in the ISS, and I rode Discovery home. So I got to fly on both Endeavour and Discovery, and then my final mission was up and down on Atlantis, so I got to fly all three.
That's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. We've got a video of more fun with food, followed by the very real danger, I suppose, of landing the shuttle. And I don't know, I mean, you have great fun on board with this food. I'm thinking in this next clip that we see you playing with a water bubble, and then you're putting M&Ms inside, something like that.
Yes. So fluids, if you just let them float in zero gravity, create basically a sphere because of the surface tension. So you could create this. It looks like a bubble, but it's just a ball of water. And then we put candy inside to populate that, and then we ate it. Yeah.
But isn't it interesting how from the very early missions, the very early Apollo missions, when we first saw what it was like to see astronauts playing with zero gravity, you still do it. You can't get over the novelty of it, really, can you?
It's wonderful, and I really miss it. There's all kinds of. It is a very surreal and strange environment, and the simplest things can be actually fascinating. I remember just seeing a notebook that had opened up, and it created a perfect cylinder by just opening up around its binding until it created the pages, created the cylinder, and it was just floating through the cabin. And I thought, wow, that's really beautiful, and it's just a notebook. But I mean, it's remarkable. That environment makes things possible that ordinarily are wouldn't exist, and they become wondrous. So that and then of course the flying around, like you saw in the video there, when we say floating, but really as soon as you push away from a wall, it's like you're Superman, as you saw. And that having that ability to fly is something I miss a lot. That was a lot.
Yeah, it must be a knockout. That little clip video there ended though with obviously the landing of the space shuttle, and you can't get away from the fact that you're putting yourself in tremendous danger, as we came to know only too well with Columbia and Challenger. Takeoff and landing, such a dangerous time. Do you think of the danger, or by then you are so trained and so pumping adrenaline, I suppose, and excited? Do you think of it at the time?
Oh, no, you do think of it. You're certainly aware of it. Like this is not the safest way to spend a Wednesday when you're getting in there and blasting off. But I think there's a couple things. One, your sense of excitement overwhelms your anxiety. So the sense of adventure or excitement is stronger than that sense of fear. But then also, actually, what your biggest fear is that when have been training for years and years, and you have a very challenging set of tasks in front of you, your biggest fear is making a mistake and messing up. And so, really, what you're afraid of is doing something that you later on regret at not having a chance to, or missing out the opportunity to do it as well as you had hoped to.
You have gotten a bit of a reputation as the clown in space, or at least the funny guy.
Really? Oh, who told you that?
Well, you do a podcast, I know, which you call something about the funny astronauts or something, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, funny astronauts. You do it with fellow astronaut Mike Massimino.
Yeah, it's like what you do if you're not really a good astronaut. It's like my cousin used to say, it's like nobody's ever funny as a first choice. So I guess I was a comic relief. Every one of these space movies, you got one person on the crew that's comic relief, right? So somebody had to do it.
You do. Well, I'm sure you're not that at all, but you don't mind poking fun at yourself, I suppose. The other interesting thing about being an astronaut is that it phases some of the most important and famous people on Earth. They can mix with anyone, they can be from Hollywood, they can be from the Vatican City, anything, the royal family here in Britain, but they are knocked out to meet an astronaut, aren't they? You must have enjoyed those moments.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is fun because, there's only a certain number of us, so it does create some uniqueness, I suppose. And it does open up all kinds of doors that would have been closed to me. So I've managed to do a bunch of different things as an astronaut that I never anticipated. You know, when you get selected to be an astronaut, you get excited. You think about getting in the rocket, doing a spacewalk, and all those things that you anticipate. But there's all kinds of opportunities that you don't anticipate. And for example, I'm working on a television show right now, and I sit in a writer's room and we come up with plot ideas. And that's something that, as an engineer, that I would never have a chance to do that with on an actual television show with people who are really good at what they're doing. And you get invited into these types of events and opportunities, and it's fun. I have to admit it's a lot of fun.
Well, one of the series that you're clearly pretty addicted to, which I know I have been, is the remake of Battlestar Galactica, because you went on, well, it looks as though you went on the set and actually sat in some of their aircraft and met all the people. You're very impressed by Battlestar Galactica.
Oh yeah, that was a great show. I love that show, and I was watching it as I was getting ready to fly my first mission, and along with some other astronauts. And then when you're up on board the space station, they say, are there any like celebrities you'd like to talk to help boost your morale? Who would you like, or politicians or anybody? And you get to pick. And I said, I'd like to talk to Ron Moore and David Icke, who are the co-creators of Battlestar Galactica, because I was such a big fan of the show. And so we basically had more like a Skype or a Zoom call from space, and it was great. I got to compare notes, ask about the show. And then they invited me to come down to the set after I got back down to Earth, and for the shooting of actually the final episode of the final season. So that's me on the set there, and I got to go up to Vancouver.
Yeah, I too am a total fan. Have you ever been along to one of those Comic-Cons then?
Yeah. So the fellow in this picture, if you look, the fellow just to my left on the far right of the picture, that's Michael Hogan, and he played the executive officer on Battlestar Galactica. And we became friends after we met this day on the set. And one day he was going to Comic-Con, we were at my house in Los Angeles, and he said, I got tickets to Comic-Con. I got invited to a couple of the parties, and I said, well, let's go. Like if you got the invite, I haven't. He's like, well, it's, we're in LA, it's all the way down to San Diego. I was like, hey, Michael, I have an airplane. We can hop in. So we actually hopped in there. There we are down there. And we flew down to San Diego and parked my little airplane next to all these, like next to Harrison Ford's jet and whatever. But Michael said, we don't have a hotel room. We have, and it's hard to get a hotel room on that weekend down there in San Diego. So I said, oh, but we have a friend, Captain Kirk. We can call Priceline and get, William Shatner will help us out and get us a room. So we ended up getting a room through Priceline. But it was a terrible room. It was this dilapidated Ramada Inn. It was falling apart. And Hogan and I had to share a room, and we're in the room, and we're looking up at the ceiling, with the air conditioner was broken. It was this terrible ramshackle hotel. And we just looked up at the ceiling and went, Kirk, for getting us into thank you, William Shatner, for that terrible experience.
Yes, exactly.
No, I don't want to get Priceline mad at me. It was actually, we had a great time. Actually, we had Hogan and I had a lot of fun down there. Yeah,
but exactly, what a great experience. Which I don't know who's luckier, you or him. So you are very well known for your reviews of the big time space movies. Can I briefly ask you what you think of them? Because I've always wanted to know. I mean, I love the movie Apollo 13 because apparently Tom Hanks was, an absolute nerd about getting everything right, as was Ron Howard, the director. What did you think of Apollo 13?
It's the gold standard. I mean, if you talk about technical accuracy in any space movie, it doesn't get any better than Apollo 13. I mean, they actually, in fact, the dialogue, Ron Howard insisted that the dialogue be taken directly from the transcripts of the actual conversations that were held. There are a few conversations that were not recorded that they took some liberties with, but otherwise it was the actual, verbatim. So it's extremely accurate. It's so accurate that the TV show I'm working on now, which is For All Mankind, it's on Apple TV. And it's also Ron Moore, the fellow that was in that picture, that was the co-creator of Battlestar Galactica. He's also the co-creator of For All Mankind, which is how I got involved. But anyway, in that show, we were preparing to shoot a scene that was set at NASA during the Apollo era, and I saw the set design, the art department that was doing the dressing of the set, where I had photographs that were stills from Apollo 13. And so and that was their reference as they were creating the set. And I was like, why are you dressing the set based on the stills from a movie? Why don't you, we have actual pictures of what the real thing looked like. Why don't you use that? And I said, Garrett, you don't understand. Apollo 13 had such a big impact that most people, the audience, if they see something that doesn't look like the movie, it will be seen more incongruous to them than if they see something that's not like the actual thing.
Well, that's 10 out of 10 for maybe Apollo 13. First Man, the story very much more of Apollo 11 and the first landing on the moon. What did you think of that?
That was really good. I really enjoyed that movie. I think that they had I had some issue with the sound effects. There was a lot of creaking and like every time they were flying around or trying to land on the space, and anytime there was a lot of drama, the ship would be going like it was about to collapse. And I was like, what's going? That's not a thing. So I had a little issue with the sound design on that, but otherwise I thought it was well done.
Okay, The Martian, which I love. What do you think?
Martian was great. Really, another movie that was actually pretty accurate. The book itself is really good, and the movie was pretty faithful to the book. They did take a few liberties, and in one particular example is at the no spoilers, but there's a scene where an astronaut cuts his glove so they can use jet propulsion, kind of like Iron Man to fly around, and that was ridiculous. but other than that, it's actually pretty good.
Interesting as well. They talked a lot about when they made The Martian about the spacesuit that he wore, because apparently that style of spacesuit wouldn't really be very practical for Mars, but because you'd have to wear something enormous. I don't know, and they ended up going for something more aesthetic than practical. And you, I know, have had a lot to do, obviously, with the design of spacesuits. So was his spacesuit realistic or not?
Kind of, not. So that suit, which is a very form-fitting suit, is called a mechanical counterpressure suit. So the most spacesuits that we have are basically containers or almost like big balloons that fill up with pressure, and you inflate them, and then when you're inside, it gives you your own personal atmosphere that's the same pressure, that it gives you enough pressure that you can survive and protect you from the vacuum of space. The other way to do that is just squeeze your body all over. And this is an approach that was used for high altitude suits early on in the program. It doesn't work very well in vacuum or even on Mars, where there is some atmosphere, but it's negligible as far as the amount of pressure. It's a fraction of a pound per square inch. So using that kind of a suit on Mars, even with giving them some liberties for the fact that you're a little bit further in the future with better technology, it's a little much. But it does make Matt Damon look really good. So I acknowledge that. Okay.
Yeah. Somewhere along the line, you have to acknowledge, even as an astronaut, you have to acknowledge that Hollywood has to play things in a certain way. Otherwise, we wouldn't watch it. So the other two big ones, I suppose, I ought to ask you about are Gravity, which was fascinating to me because it really did try and explain to us visually how difficult it is, the aerodynamics, or not space dynamics. And the way that if there is no resistance, you just go on and on spinning and all the rest of it. What did you think of that?
Well, I give them a lot of kudos for they used the 3D as more than just a gimmick. I think they actually used it to great effect to immerse you into an environment that is completely alien and not simply just, something went flying past my head, to give you that kind of gimmicky kind of thing. So I do think that movie gave you the look and feel of doing a spacewalk more accurately than any other movie I've ever seen. Having said that, there are times in that movie where they completely blow off the laws of physics and do things like changing orbital inclinations with a fire extinguisher and stuff. They do all kinds of ridiculous things. But there's a scene where again, I don't want to give out too many spoilers, but there is a scene where Sandra Bullock is holding on to George Clooney, and he's coming like flying on by as they're doing a spacewalk, and she grabs him and she's got him, and he's no longer flying on by, but he's like, you have to let me go, because as if like he's pulling her off the space station and weighing her down. There's no gravity, right? Once she stopped him, all she had to do was like give him a little, just a little flick with her finger, and he would have been going right back to the airlock, and they could have gone inside and had lunch. It would be fine. Instead, she like lets him go, and he falls. Where's he falling to? He's not. There's no gravity. He'd just be floating right there. So, or more, to be more succinct, I could say that, as my wife pointed out, I said, look, if you have George Clooney with a firm grasp, under no circumstances, no matter what the situation, do you let go?
Yeah. Well, yes, exactly. That's Hollywood. Interstellar, though, my sons are particularly keen on Interstellar. Does it make sense to you?
I'm not an expert on relativistic physics, so it made sense from what I know. But I know this guy Kip Thorne, who was a consultant on that over at Caltech, and he did a great job of working with them to visually present some things that are pretty accurate, given the it goes way beyond Newtonian physics. So it actually with the use of these black holes and extreme gravitational fields. So it is from what I understand, quite accurate, and I found it very entertaining.
Good. It's nice that you can sit back and be entertained by a space movie. So, what about the politicians you've met? All of the very famous people you've met. I mean, being an astronaut, as I said before, it's sort of you're right above the A-list. You're way above the A-list.
I don't know.
And some of them must be knocked out to meet you. We've got some lovely pictures here of there you are in the George Bush Oval Office. Is that the Oval?
Yeah, that's with one of the. So I was escorting one of the crew's families from the crew of Columbia. That's the family of Alain Ramon, who was unfortunately killed on Columbia. And President Bush invited us to bring his family by the Oval Office, and we had all the families there that day. And it was the same day that Colin Powell was giving his address at the United Nations about the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. That big famous presentation he gave that day that had it turned out was a bit erroneous. But so we're in there with the president while that was going on, and I said to him, like, shouldn't you be watching this? and he said to me, he goes, no, I know what he's going to say. We already went over it. I don't need to watch. And he was hanging out with us instead, which was seemed kind of crazy, but he was extremely generous with his time and with those families. We expected to go in there for 5 minutes meet and greet and be out, but we ended up spending it seemed like about an hour in there after
we got some more pictures of you with the Obamas as well. So when you meet the President of the United States, what's the question they most likely put to you? What do they really want to know from an astronaut?
I'm not saying this particularly about President Obama, because actually he asked some really insightful questions. It was interesting. He did not prepare anything for our visit. There we are with him in the Oval Office, and he but he peppered us with questions off the top of his head that were really intelligent and insightful. And it was clear he had a natural curiosity about space and engineering and everything he was asking us about. So that was so. But I tell you, but in general, the questions I get, it doesn't matter if they're world leaders or if they're kindergarten kids. The questions we get are always the same, which is, how do you go to the bathroom?
Yeah.
Did you see any aliens? These questions that you get all the time are it really doesn't matter who you are. You get the same questions.
And actually, the bathroom in space is particularly moot for you, because was it on your first mission that the toilet in the ISS failed on you?
Wow. And you've done your homework. I was kind of hoping people would forget about that. But yeah, that's true.
Broke.
Yeah, it did. And you only have one, so that's a serious situation when that happens. Yeah, so we did have that failure, and we without going into too many details, we found a way to use other equipment to get us through for a period of time until the space shuttle Discovery showed up with Mark Kelly was a commander. And I remember Mark Kelly opened the hatch and he leaned in and said, "Hey, Garrett, did you call for a plumber?" It's like, yes. And
Yeah, so you were
they brought
pleased
up some
to see
spare
him, but
parts.
more pleased to see the missing parts for the loo, what we call the loo.
Yeah.
There must be an ongoing joke about who broke it. Was it you?
No, no, no.
All
It
right,
was Shuri.
we'll go away. We'll sidestep the toilet humor. Go to some more of these lovely photographs of you meeting people who you must have thought famous, but they must have been more knocked out to meet you. Nichelle Nichols, who of course is one of the originals from Star Trek.
Yeah,
Lovely
Lieutenant
picture of
Uhura.
you.
That was I'm a huge fan, so that was a thrill. We're sitting there together watching the space shuttle Endeavour arrive at LAX in Los Angeles to be delivered to the California Science Center where it's on exhibit right now. And so we sat there together to watch it come in on the back of a 747 and taxi right up to us. And that was exciting, but I was more excited about being able to hang out with Lieutenant Uhura. That was pretty
She
cool.
is an absolute star, isn't she? We've got another one of possibly one of the best pilots in the world, Sully.
That's right, Sully Sullenberger. Yeah, that was an event we did for philanthropic aviation groups. But yeah, he's got a lot of respect for him. I mean, what he did in the cockpit that day is the stuff of legend, and what we point to all the time when we talk about the importance of professionalism and the adaptability and flexibility of having a human in the loop. I use that as an example for my classes that I teach at USC.
Yeah, important. But you've been thrilled as well to be invited, as I said, you're well above the A-list, onto some of these big TV shows. Stephen Colbert, I think we've got you with.
Yeah. That's we did a couple of things. We actually, the first one we did was when I was on the space station. We did an interview, and that ended up airing live. But I never got to meet him because I was just talking into a camera, of course. And but then I came back to Earth, and he invited me to the studio, and we taped an episode live, or we broadcast it live. So that was a big thrill. Yeah, I'm a big fan of his too.
And then, I mean, my goodness, Brad Pitt.
Oh yeah, yep. Yeah, for those of you that might be confused, he's the one on the left.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. And Morgan Freeman too. So I mean, you obviously mix in these very elevated circles.
Yeah, I did tell Brad Pitt that I was a little mad at him. I worked with him on a movie called Ad Astra that he did.
Oh yes.
And I tried to help him. My job was to teach him how to pretend to fly a spaceship in the movie. And I told him, I said, by the way, I'm really angry with you. And he said, well, what do you mean? What's the matter? I said, well, look at who they cast to be astronauts in these movies. It's people like you, and like Matt Damon and like Tom Hanks and George Clooney, for crying out loud, right? So they meet me and they're disappointed because I'm 5'5". I don't have a lot of my hair left, and they were expecting Brad Pitt or something. And I say, why do you guys always have to be the astronauts? It sets me up. But why couldn't like Paul Giamatti? Guy is a fine actor, right? I think he's been nominated for or has won Academy Awards.
Yeah, I did.
Why couldn't he be an astronaut? The guy would do a great job. Why not him? And he looked at me and he goes, Garrett, you have to understand, I can't really fly a spaceship. All I can do is stand in the spot where I'm supposed to stand, be well lit, and speak some lines as if they just came to me off the top of my head. That's the only talent I have. If you take this away from me, I'll be out there in the street digging ditches or something. I won't be able to support my family. I'll have no career. So please, give me a break. And it was great because after he went on, and after a while, I kind of was feeling bad for Brad Pitt. So
it's nice. It's nice to hear there's a touch of humility about it. I mean, you earned your place on top of the A-list, didn't you? And I guess they have too, but in a very different way. It's nice though that we were saying at the very beginning that you might like to have played for the Knicks or the Yankees or whatever, but you found yourself being an astronaut instead. Duh. It's nice that when we've got a lovely picture of when you went to the Yankee Stadium. Is it the Yankee Stadium here?
Oh yeah, that's Yankee Stadium. Yep.
They said, "Hey, welcome, Dr. Garrett Reisman," there in big, big letters. And didn't you do the first? No, you
Pitch.
help me with the
First
sporting
pitch.
term here. You did
Yeah,
the first
that's
row,
right. Yeah. The first pitch, which
the
is what
first.
we call when you throw the ball. That's not when you take the field. That's not a reference to the field in a football match. Okay,
I,
so yeah, it's a different use
I
of the
tell you what,
word.
that must be nerve-wracking. You're trained to be an astronaut, but going out there to make such, a big deal in front of an enormous crowd, making that first pitch, you must have been nervous doing that.
Oh, terrified. It was. I'll tell you that people ask me what's the most scary thing I did as an astronaut, and by far away, it's not launching on the rocket or doing the spacewalk. But by far, the scariest thing I had to do was throw out that first pitch.
Yeah.
Because you're right, I can perform under pressure when I'm doing my job, but performing under pressure while doing somebody else's job is terrifying.
Yeah. Was it okay? Did it go well?
It did. It did.
Oh,
Fortunately,
that's
it did.
good.
Yeah.
It would have
Yeah.
been better. Would have been even better in zero gravity, I guess.
Oh yeah, because you can't bounce it. The thing you worry about most when you throw that ball is that you throw it too weakly and it dribbles up or it rolls up to the catcher, and that's really embarrassing. You don't want to do that. So when you have no gravity, that's impossible. It'll just keep going.
Yeah.
It's much easier. Yeah.
Well, that's why they played golf on the moon, isn't it? So life after NASA. Did they tell you to retire, or did you opt to do it? And you ended up at SpaceX. How did that happen?
Yeah, so that was my choice. I could have kept going, but it was at the end of the shuttle program, and I knew that I could fly again on a Russian rocket, go back up to the space station. But it was going to be a while because when you come back, you kind of have to get in the back of the line and wait for your turn to come up again. And just looking at the numbers, I realized that was going to be about a 5-year wait. And at the same time, I saw something amazing happening in the private sector, which was that you had this beginning of a whole new way of doing human spaceflight happening in the commercial sector. This idea of a commercial human spaceflight, and I saw the potential there. It was an unrealized potential at the time because really we hadn't gotten too far. But it was at the very beginning, but I recognized the potential. And I met with Elon Musk, who runs SpaceX, and I asked him for a job, and he said, okay. And I started working there in early 2011.
And you ended up as Director of Space Operations, I think.
That's right. Yeah, that's
And
my final position.
now, you'll have to tell me about those space suits, because we've never seen anything like that before. And they look a bit, they almost look like a throwback to 1960s space movies, don't they? They must have been designed. I mean, obviously they do the job, but they look very different from anything NASA has ever done before.
They do look very different, and that's by design. So Elon was very particular about the aesthetics of the suit and said that, look, we need to, these suits need to look good. And at first I kind of was somewhat unsympathetic with that requirement because as an astronaut, all I really cared about was that the suit works and it keeps me safe and that I can function in it and do my job. But I began to appreciate what he was doing because he realized that the people wearing those suits, walking out and getting into the rocket, that was going to be the iconic vision or image, the iconic image of this whole endeavor. And what he was trying to do was not just as had been done before by government contractors. He wasn't just trying to fulfill the terms of a contract and get paid. He had much bigger ambitions beyond just this one immediate contract. His ambitions were to get the entire world excited about a future in space. And he says, if it doesn't look cool, that's not going to happen. But kids aren't going to aspire to this and get motivated by seeing somebody walk out in an ugly suit. So it was important to accomplish his larger goal, which was basically exciting the entire world about spaceflight, not just meeting NASA's requirements.
Well, nothing could be cooler than the visual proof we all had of the fact that you can, and he did, land a rocket back on its tail. I will never forget the first time I saw that. How did you feel the first time? I mean, just look at it. I could look at it over and over again, and you can't quite believe that's real.
The very first time we've been trying really hard, and the first, I think, 6 times the rocket exploded in an attempt to accomplish this. And it's a very, very difficult technical feat. The challenge, for a variety of different reasons, was really hard. And a lot of people thought it was absolutely impossible, and told Elon that. And I remember thinking at the time the same, to be honest with you. I was thinking also it was probably impossible, but I didn't tell him that because I didn't want to say that to the boss. I didn't want. I was smart enough not to say it to him. But it was hard. And when it did actually work, I wasn't directly involved with this project. I didn't participate in the design of this flight operation, but I was in the crowd watching it happen live the first time we actually did it successfully. And I remember freaking out, just jumping up and down. It was one of the most rewarding and exciting moments of my career. And I have done 3 spacewalks, so it's saying a lot. It was super fulfilling to watch that happen.
I mean, yet again, as you say, you just couldn't believe it because it's one of those things that science fiction foresaw. And then for years and years, decades, actually, we all thought, yes, that's a bit rubbish. That's just science fiction. And then suddenly we see it happen in real life. It's almost so brilliant. You think it's CGI.
Yeah. A lot of people thought it wasn't real at first. But now it's what I love about it is it's become commonplace. We've done it so many times now that it's almost an afterthought. But I tell you, every time I watch it happen, every time we launch one of these rockets and I see it land, it's still special to me.
Are you still with SpaceX now?
I'm no longer there full time. I'm now a professor at USC, but I do get involved from time to time as a consultant. So I'm no longer an employee, but they gave me a title of senior advisor, and so I do help out when they can use some of my expertise on a particular matter.
And your motivational speaking, I imagine, as well, because it is still about motivating another generation to be excited about space. We live in a world at the moment where we're all a bit cynical. Some of the world's at war, and we could all get very depressed. But there is still room for being optimistic about the future, don't you think?
That is a great thing about human spaceflight is when you watch people, especially people launching on these rockets and going into space and having these experiences and then coming back and conveying those experiences and the magic of being up in space and getting people excited. It is by nature hopeful and joyous, and it is a departure from a lot of the other prognostications about where we're headed as far as politically, as far as war, as far as climate change, and all the doom and gloom that it seems to be pervasive these days as we look ahead with all the discord in our politics and everything. Human spaceflight remains this bright and shining, hopeful vision of the future, and I want us all to have that. I want my kids to grow up and live that kind of Star Trek future where we all get along and we're out there exploring the universe. I really hope that's where we're headed.
Oh, I've got some lovely pictures. Lovely pictures of you and your family, even in Star Trek outfits, as you speak about. So you've got 2 children. That's
right. I got.
You met at college, I think.
Yes, we met in grad school out here in California. My wife Simone Francis and those are our 2 kids, Buster and Bixby. Buster now is 11 and Bixby is 4. Yeah, there we are. That's when Bixby was really young, but yeah, we definitely got into the
and I noticed one of your children is doing the Vulcan. I can just about do it. The Vulcan Live Long and Prosper. Can you do it?
I can.
Hey, you do it very well. My goodness.
A lot of practice.
Well, look, Garrett, it's been brilliant talking to you. Thank you so much for giving us your time. I hope we meet you in person one day, because you're truly inspirational. It's lovely to hear you talking about space in such an evocative and wonderful way. But so I'll just get the gap. So do please live long and prosper.
Thanks, and you too. And I hope to see you in person someday.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Well, there we are. That was wonderful. Garrett Reisman talking to us about his career in space and other things. Next week, however, on Viking TV, it's Norway week, and I'm going to be cooking with Nevada Berg. Until I see you then, live long and prosper. There we go. And goodbye.